Hello and welcome to the YouTube version of the Soulful Self podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Cora, and I am so super excited that you are here. This podcast is a resource for all beings to grow personally, heal emotionally, and align with our highest spiritual involvement. Above all else, this podcast is a reminder that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience rather than simple human beings having a spiritual experience. So if this message resonates with you, if you want to see human consciousness elevated to its highest possible timeline, I'm going to invite you to support this free resource by simply liking this video, subscribing to my channel, and commenting your own thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. These simple actions can really go a long way, so I appreciate your consideration. And now let's jump into today's episode. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 88 of the Soulful Self podcast. I am your host, Chelsea Cora, and I am super excited to have you all here with me today. Today we are welcoming a very special guest on the show by the name of Dr. Nelson Valena. Dr. Nelson is a board-certified doctor in physical medicine, rehabilitation, and brain injury medicine, with a practice in neurological rehabilitation of over 20 years. In 2011, Dr. Nelson suffered a catalyzing minor stroke that catapulted him into the world of spiritual awakening and holistic healing. In today's episode, he shares the story of not only his own journey into the traditional westernized field of medicine, but also how having this health crisis really changed his view on what it means to heal, not only on the physical level, but on the spiritual level as well. We talk about many topics during this conversation, including what it could mean to marry the two worlds of science and spirituality, as well as some of the lessons he has learned from opening up the Golden Hill Retreat Center, which is a phenomenal spiritual retreat center located in Coldspring, Texas, which is actually where I met Dr. Nelson Valena, and we go into that story a little bit as well. But overall, today is an amazing opportunity to see some of the spiritual beliefs and principles that we talk about all the time on this podcast from the lens of somebody who is coming from a more traditionally scientific or medical background. So I'm super excited for y'all to hear this interview today. I think there's so much value and wisdom in both his story and some of the more foundational takeaways from his knowledge and training that he incorporates into the message of today's interview. So I hope you all are excited as I am to welcome to the Soulful Self podcast, Dr. Nelson Valena. Nelson Valena, welcome to the Soulful Self podcast. It's such an honor to have you here today. How are you?
I'm great, Chelsea. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share and converse in this great topic.
Yes, awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into it with an icebreaker question, which is to describe a little bit about yourself and your cultural upbringing.
Yes, well, I was born in the Philippines, and my early childhood was basically in a little town called Calawag, Quezon. And it was a town right by the sea. And my parents were both physicians, and they actually started a clinic there. Actually, it's a hospital now in the Philippines. And so I was pretty much grew up in the medical field in regards to, knowing my parents' life and how, they were and some of the challenges and struggles, but also, some of the benefits that medicine and healthcare can be for people in regards to maintaining their health and lifestyle.
Okay, awesome. So then being born into such a medically minded family, this kind of set the trajectory for your own life, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think a big part of the reason why I went to medicine is because, of course, of my parents. I was never told that that's what I had to be, was to be a doctor, but early on, pretty much I had a feeling that that was expected of me. So in the Philippines, there's actually a ceremony when you finish kindergarten, where you pronounce to the town what you are going to be when you grew up. So I have a picture of myself. I think I was about 5.5 years old, and I had a stethoscope around my neck, and I was speaking, on the microphone that when I grew up that I was going to be a doctor. So that sort of set the tone, in terms of my life, my early childhood, and the expectations that were put on me. So it was interesting how it sort of played out. Early on, I was pretty much thinking that I was going to go into the medical field. But then, right when I was going to college, there was something about psychology that intrigued me, and the brain and the mind and behavior. And so I picked the University of Michigan for a couple of reasons. One was that they had a very good psychology department there. And I felt also that I need a little bit more space from my family and being, away from Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, where I grew up in. And I felt like I just needed a different perspective and different environment to help me grow and figure things out for myself. So I went into college thinking I was going to be a psychologist, or some type in the medical field, with the emphasis, or with the caveat that I would still do my pre-med education. So
Mm.
I was dabbling into psychology as well as doing my pre-med courses. And I've at the second year, I realized that, something didn't seem like I wasn't quite sure of, why I was, doing what I was doing. And part of it was I was having a lot of difficulty uh, managing all of my classes and all of the other obligations. I was working part-time jobs, and I felt burnt out. And so I ended up taking a semester off to reevaluate, and did all kinds of jobs from tutoring. I worked at J.C. Penney's, and um, you know, I relieved people from their, on their breaks. And so I also was able to experience being a truck driver.
Oh,
So
wow.
actually in college, I worked in near Detroit, and in Detroit is where all the automobile companies were, and they needed people to drive pickup trucks and get the mileage and the oil. And so I learned how to use a CB and all of that. So it was a couple of months of just exploration. And but at that end of that couple of months, I realized that, I don't think I wanted to pursue any of these other things that I actually was trying out. And I said, you know what? Maybe going back into medicine is what I want to do. So it gave me a little bit of focus or clarity that, yes, the medical field and helping people is what I wanted to do for my life.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think it takes a lot of courage to kind of listen to your own inner truth when it starts asking us, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or is it because this is the expectation that was put on me? And then to actually take the action to go out and explore different options, especially when there is a level of pressure and familial expectation.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, what has your spiritual awakening journey been like? And when did that start?
Yeah. So I was pretty much living the traditional physician's life in regards to, after medical school, it was residency. And after residency, I was actually teaching at the medical school, and then started a private practice. And then, ended up doing the typical thing where you always think, what's the next thing to accomplish? And at one point, I was able to have an outpatient clinic, doing inpatient hospital work, as well as employing, three other physicians in my company. And at that point, as I would consider would be the height of my career, was I had, like I said, multiple clinics. I was teaching some, as well as having, many employees. And I realized that, I kept going, and having a lots of, pressure on myself to create more, and do more and learn more. And at that point, at a certain point, it resulted in this big hammer over my head, which was eventually resulting in me having a stroke at age 46.
Okay. And so that stroke was like a breaking point moment when you started to explore spirituality or other modalities of healing, or what happened next?
Yeah, so when I had my stroke, it really was what they would term the dark night of the soul.
Mm.
It really made me reevaluate life in general in terms of what I wanted to do, how I was going, what my life is supposed to be, and really started thinking about why I felt like I had to work so much. Because one of the things that I prided myself was to be the hardest worker ever. And that's one of the things that I learned as early on as a child, and especially with my parents being physicians, that ingrained in us was this work ethic, that no matter what, we push through it, we work hard, we help other people, and no matter if you're tired or fatigued or stressed, that somehow you manage and you push through it. So that was sort of my modus operandi, was that I just could go through anything as long as I put my will through it. And I just, it's mind over matter, is that whatever it takes, I can do it as long as I will myself through it. And when I had the stroke, what they told me was that they couldn't find anything wrong in the studies. They couldn't find any problems with my vessels or my lab's blood work. So they called it cryptogenic, which means that they really couldn't find an exact etiology. So they basically said that it was related to, most likely, to stress. So I was, as a physician, stress is part of our life. And at that point, I told myself, how can I continue doing my work without having stress? Because to me, taking on a life of a physician is basically taking on a life of stress. So those two things didn't coincide. That if I was continuing my job, how is it that I can prevent myself from having another stroke? And that sort of activated this really questioning part within me, thinking, what is going on? What is this telling me? And what changes do I need to make in my life in order for me to be more in balance? Because that was the message that I got, was I had the stroke because I was out of balance.
Okay. So how did you receive that message?
Yes, it was very, very difficult at first. What happened was, after the stroke, I developed a panic disorder. I mean, I was really suffering silently. I tried to work. I only took, after my stroke, I took about 2 weeks off. But of course, because of the pressures, and I felt guilty to get back as soon as possible. So I basically forced myself, or willed myself, to go back to work. And what I realized was I had a lot of difficulty with anxiety after my returning back to work. Part of me didn't want to push myself, because I felt like if I pushed too hard, that I would have another stroke. So there was this cognitive dissonance within me, feeling like, yes, I want to do my job, I want to do it well, but I don't want to push myself and work myself to death to the point where my health will be in jeopardy. So I was overwhelmed, and I really didn't know what to do. And that resulted in me going into this deep depression, where I was taking multiple antidepressants and benzodiazepines for me to get through the day. And there was a point during that low period where I was basically in front of St. Luke's Hospital in Houston, and they have a metro. Sorry, it brings up a lot of emotion.
Yeah, of course.
There was a metro trail in front of the hospital, and I kept looking at it, and I was walking out of the hospital, and I kept thinking, if I jumped in front of that metro rail, that things would be better. And at that point, it really struck me like, man, there's something definitely wrong. Like I have to do something, otherwise I'm not I'm not going to survive. So it really became a part of this exploration of what that something is. And gradually, I started delving into my spirituality, and meaning that I started to um, dig deep in terms of what was truly the things that were important to me, and um, what were the things that I was not in alignment with in regards to those things that was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And gradually, it's certain things started coming into um, awareness. I mean, one of them was the fact that the money and the prestige and the fact that I was successful and I had a lot of friends and I had a lot of nice things. All of those things, even though I was able to accomplish it didn't make me happy. That wasn't the thing that was fueling me. And I was trying to find out what that was. What is that thing that fuels me and that gives me passion? And so I started to realize that in terms of my emotional state, I wasn't really feeling the full range of my emotion, that I was always been taught to keep an even keel, to be at a certain range of being, frustrated or angry. I was always encouraged not to express those negative emotions as a child, and even as an adult. I think I was one of those guys that people would probably describe as, happy-go-lucky, always trying to be on the positive mood and all of that, and that's true because I've always felt or learned that being angry or frustrated and all of that was not a good thing, that
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't encouraged for me to express that side of me. So I would try to do my best, to be a happy person and to try to make things right for people and not to, create waves. So that became part of my, operating system, and that I realized really restricted me in my ability to feel. And that was again, that was a realization for me that I was disconnected. I was disconnected from my mind and my body and my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that became a very intense exploration for me to open myself up to exploring those emotions and to be able to express emotions. So I ended up going to a psychologist, and I did have a psychiatrist, of course, to regulate my medications. And I started to explore, what are these reasons that I feel like I have to work so much and that I have to accomplish things, and why I have to be at a certain level all the time. And I realized that those were things that I learned as a child and growing up. And, those were the things that were act or encouraged, within my family, within our culture, is that we should be hard workers, and, nice people, and that we shouldn't express negative emotions, and that, we should help others above ourselves. And so a lot of those things were fueling me to do the things that I was doing. And I realized that it was actually not to my highest good and for my good to my higher self. So I began to try to ask myself, what is good for my higher self and for me? And what is it that I need? And how can I get to the point where I'm giving myself what I need?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Instead of just constantly working to uphold that paradigm or that ego image of being the hardest worker in the world, right? And really killing yourself in the process, hurting your body, maintaining that disconnection from your emotions, your spirit, and your mind. And so you're talking about, you went to a psychologist and you started asking yourself these deeper, more important questions. And one thing that I also know about you is that you went to this center in California, right? And there was a lot of spiritual healing happening there. So what was that like?
Yeah, so as I explored, there was a lot of synchronicities, and as you go into the spiritual world, you begin to realize that when you follow that path and you follow the breadcrumbs, these
Mm.
synchronicities start to happen. So one of the first experiences that I had was in a retreat center called Esalen in Big Sur, California. So this is a place where many of these famous philosophers and spiritual gurus do workshops and classes. And I heard about it from a friend of mine back in the 1990s. And his mother, was one of these flower child children in the 60s. And she told me about this place. And it really piqued my interest at that point. But when I was going through my dark night of the soul, I started to ask, where can I get help? Or where can I explore these things? And that Esalen, that retreat center sort of came up to my radar. And so I went to an Esalen workshop, and it was on spirituality and like the chakra systems and the energetic systems. And, as a physician, we're not ever told anything about the energetic systems. And really, in general, the Western allopathic model does not consider energy or the spirit or the spirituality side as much of a big factor in our health and wellness. But I soon realized that, this is one thing that's really missing in our healing paradigm, is that exploration of how our spirituality affects our mental state and our emotional state and eventually our physical state. And during that workshop, they had me do a type of breathing, which is what I now know is one name for it is holotropic breath work, which is a type of breath work that was created by a psychiatrist named Stanislav Grof. And what you do is you have very deep breathing, and it's sort of like a meditation, but in conjunction with it, you have evocative music that's played along. And what happens is you get in an altered state, and it basically gets you access to your subconscious. So what happened during that breath work was when I was breathing, I felt a lot of tingling, and I felt like I was in an altered state. But I had a vision of me as a little boy in the corner, and I was crying, and I was feeling hopeless and asking for help. And um, it was very emotional. I told myself, what was this? What was this image, and what was it telling me? And when I had that experience, this surge of energy came right through me. It was as if it came right through what I know now is my crown chakra, and all the way down my spine and right down to the bottom of my spine through my feet. And what I could sense was this big surge of electrical energy radiating from the top all the way down to the bottom and right through me and all around me. And I've never felt anything like that in my life. And I was like sort of taken back at it and thinking, what was going on? What is this telling me? And at that point, I started learning more about the energetic system and the chakra systems. And I realized that what happens is when we have blocked emotions or things that we push down and repress, it results in the energy being blocked. And that when these energies are blocks, your life force, what they call in the Indian tradition is prana, and in the Chinese medicine is qi. The life force is also impaired. It becomes not optimal in terms of its flow. So many of us, um, many of us during our childhood have these challenges in our life and these emotions and traumas that we don't want to, or we don't know how to cope with. And so we tend to repress it and not want to think about it. And when we do that, it basically gets lodged into our energetic body. And it can manifest itself into a physical manifestation or symptom later on as an adult if it's not processed and released. So one of the things that came to me during that time is, I really need to look into what these subconscious emotions or these things that I have not dealt with. So I started looking into how can I get more information about this. And during that time, I had what they call a spiritual massage, which is a combination of a regular physical massage and energy work. And the person who gave me that session told me that when I go back to Houston, that I need to go find a shaman. And at that point, I was like, what's a shaman? I had never really heard about that. And so I started researching about shamanism, and it led me to the research on the ancient traditions in Peru and in other different cultures. But it became apparent to me that that was one way that I could start figuring out, what are these blocks that I'm having that's causing me to have these problems with me being able to express myself authentically and to actually improve my energy and my ability to be authentic and to optimize my pri or my prana or chi.
Wow, that's powerful to have that experience. It sounded like a pretty shifting moment in your healing journey. And then to be able to learn more and more about it later, to be able to piece together what exactly happened to you in that experience during the breath work. So it sounds like you have been on an incredible healing journey. And I'm curious to know if there were any other particular modalities along the way that have been influential in that.
Yes. So one of the things that I became very interested in was plant medicine. So the use of psychedelic medicines in regards to being able to tap into that subconscious in order for people to be able to bring it up to the surface and be able to release it. So at my first experience in Peru, I I was able to go to a place called Etnica's Integrative Medicine Clinic. And I chose that particular clinic because it actually had physicians, nurses, psychologists, as well as the shamans all working together to
Wow.
do these ceremonies and these sessions. So I was able to spend some time with them and be able to learn more about their intake and what they look for and their processing and integration. And of course, because there was a team there, I felt more comfortable, especially being a novice in regards to the plant medicine in the psychedelic world, because I've never really taken psychedelics before. So that's one of the things that was very much in my mind, or spirit told me, was that psychedelics and exploration of the natural plant medicine in healing is going to be key to healing me, but also by me understanding that, I'll be able to help guide others through the process.
Wow. Okay. So this kind of segues us into something that you are very passionate about, which is the practice of holistic health, which is looking at our health from both the westernized medical perspective as well as these traditional shamanic or spiritual perspectives. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your journey with this. And because I know one of the things that prompted you to exploring it more was not only your own personal experience, having the stroke, having to uncover the underlying reasons why you had the stroke, because there were no necessary medical reasons for it, right? When you ran the test, they couldn't find anything. So it was clear that it had something to do on a deeper spiritual or emotional level. But also being a physician and working with people who are being rehabilitated from neurosurgery, right? And seeing that after they would go through the rehabilitation process, they might come back with similar symptoms as before because the underlying spiritual purposes were not being treated. So if there's anything more that you would say about kind of what the marriage between modern medicine and spiritual understanding could look like.
Yes. So that is one of the key messages for me is I remember when I was working full time at the medical center that, I would be seeing a lot of patients, at multiple hospitals. And I kept feeling that what we were doing was so limited. When we're trained in medical school, we're basically trained on evaluating and diagnosing certain disease and illnesses, and there's certain algorithms that we learn. If they have these types of symptoms and they're presenting it this particular way, then most likely this is a diagnosis and this is how you would treat that particular diagnosis. But we were never really taught about what is truly the root cause. But most of the emphasis was looking at how can we help the patients treat their symptoms that's a result of this particular problem. So what I was noticing was when we give medications, we're basically, yes, treating the symptoms. And we can treat it for a while, but eventually, if the root cause was not addressed, that all these symptoms and the illness and disease would come back. So I worked at different levels of care, and one of the levels I worked with the most was a level called long-term acute care, which is where patients go for prolonged periods of time after they've had treatment at the acute hospital, but they're not able to go home and they still have medical complexities. And what I noticed was a lot of these patients kept coming back, that whatever we did, we could, help them for a temporary period of time to sort of manage their symptoms and stabilize it. But when they went home, pretty soon after a while, more likely, a lot of them would have the same problem recur again, and then they come back. And I was, it just became very apparent to me that our system right now is limited in regards to really trying to figure out how can we help these patients not come back and really take care of what the problem is. So when I started looking at all of the spiritual traditions and the ancient teachings, I realized that their emphasis was not really on the physical, but mostly on the mental, emotional, and spiritual realms. Mm-hmm. And the shamans, in particular, shamanic tradition is the healing of the person by going into the spiritual realm or the realm of the unseen. And I see it now in terms of my training in psychology and neuroanatomy and physiology, is that it is getting into the energetics and into the spiritual realm in regards to the subconscious. So what the shaman does is the shaman gets into an altered state and is able to go into the energetic state, not only in their own energetic state, but the energetic state of the person that they're working with. And once they can get into that energetic state, the information that is needed to help this person heal comes out, that they're able to tap into that. And so I was like, that's very interesting that, the ancient traditions knew this, but, modern medicine doesn't even take this into consideration, is that, the ancient teachings, really the foundation is that we all have an innate ability for us to heal. And we have to be able to tap into that and to be able to support that in order to have healing of the root cause. And so the ancient traditions were able to focus on that and help whoever comes seek their expertise and their skills to facilitate that for them. And the concept for the shamans is that they are not the healers per se, but they're the vessels for the energy for the healing to take place. So the job of the shaman is to be able to get into an altered state and to be able to facilitate getting the information for the person that is needing the healing, but also to help them and empower them to take responsibility for their own healing by making changes in their life and their lifestyle and their ways of thinking, their ways of relating to themselves and others. And they do this by tapping into that universal energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so having this perspective available to us as a westernized culture could be so powerful in terms of being able to actually heal from the ailments and diseases or physical dysfunctions that we experience, rather than simply engaging in symptom management, which is mostly what the medical industry does at this time.
No, that's really the crux of the challenge for us in Western medicine, is that we do such a good job in things like acute emergencies and acute care, that of course we need, that maybe the procedure or surgery to make sure that, if we're in an accident or we're in a catastrophic situation, that there are interventions that will prevent us, from becoming severely ill enough that ends in death. So I think Western medicine is very good at that. I think what we're lacking in is our ability to help prevent these diseases from occurring and for the recurrence of these diseases. So I do feel that where we can make a big improvement, or at least enhancing our ability to help people, is to look deeper into the emotional, mental, spiritual realms and not simply focus on the physical. So I had the experience of also doing a fellowship in functional medicine. So functional medicine is a field that looks more of how each organ system affects the others, because each, in Western medicine, what has happened is that all of the different organs are basically separated and everybody becomes specialized in particular organ systems. So a lot of times when you go to specialists, everyone's looking at their specific area without really looking at the big picture of how an impairment in this one area affects everything else. And so, that becomes a problem when there's all these different people doing different things, but no one is really able to talk to each other and form a comprehensive team that will look at the bigger picture and how what one person or one specialist does will affect the others. So that is one thing that's an improvement when you look at functional medicine. And functional medicine also looks at lots of the natural options, like the supplements and the herbs, and doing the lifestyle changes and so on. But what I found in even doing the functional medicine fellowship was the emphasis was still mostly on the physical, that it
Mm.
was manipulation of, our biological processes by using more natural substances. But really, there was some emphasis on things like for self-care. That was a big one in the fellowship, and a lot on things like breath work and acupuncture with energy medicine. But I found that there was still a lack of emphasis or training on the spiritual, energetic, emotional, mental aspects. So something within me was just still telling me that this is where we need to go more of. It doesn't mean that we don't need to address, the physical and try these natural remedies, but I also got the message from Spirit that we as a medical society and healthcare practitioners have to be able to help the people that come to us in looking at the emotional, spiritual, and mental aspects. So I ended up signing up for, after my integrative medicine fellowship, I signed up for an integrative psychiatry fellowship. And this is because of my upbringing, thinking that I have to learn, 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 learn. And, something told me, though, when I signed up for the fellowship, after about 6 weeks, I was doing it. I was guided by Spirit, and the Spirit told me that I didn't need to do that fellowship at that time, that
Mm.
putting more information in my head wasn't the thing that I needed, to help me become more aligned with what I'm supposed to do. And what
Mhm.
I was told was to really focus on myself and my healing, and also to really work on my spiritual, mental, and emotional aspects. So the first time in my life that I actually quit something, and after obligating myself to the fellowship, I had this inner struggle of quitting this fellowship and losing all the money that I put into it. But there was a strong impetus for me to let it go and surrender. And so I ended up, dropping out of that fellowship and instead focus on developing this retreat center, the one that we're doing right now called Golden Hill Retreat Center.
Yes, awesome. There's such a powerful lesson in that too. You were saying that you were getting this intuitive call from Spirit to quit something that you obligated yourself to, quote unquote, and put money in. But also, anytime that we make that decision, maybe we paid for a course and we realize that it's not actually for us, it doesn't resonate with us. And so many people will just go with it anyway, because we have this belief that since I put my money there, I have to put the rest of myself there too. But in reality, when you make a decision to retain your time and your energy, you're still getting something back, right? Something very valuable. And that is a big part of the process of breaking through the conditioning that we have in our culture about obligation and having to do this or having to do that. And your story is really resemblant of this truth in so many different ways. But yes, getting into the Golden Hill Retreat Center, which is where I met you. It's a center where people can host, facilitate spiritual workshops. And I participated in a 6-month long shamanic training at the Golden Hill Retreat Center. And I would love to hear more about the mission of this center and what other kind of events go on there.
Yes. So the interesting thing is how it developed was after I did my shamanic work, I had the message and I was able to tune in more and listen more to my intuition. And that was a big thing for me, was I realized that I was not, really connected with my body and what my body and my intuition was telling me. And in fact, I think as a child or growing up and being in medicine, a lot of times we're discouraged from going with that intuition and going more with our rational mind. And
Mm.
what I've learned in looking at the spiritual text is that there's a difference between using our mind and our rational side, and also tapping into the more intuitive feeling side. And
Yeah, and you talk about this in terms of left and right brain a lot, right?
yes, so there was a couple of uh, teachers that I came across to, and one of them was a book from a book, and it was one was it's from Jill Bolte Taylor. She was a neuroscientist from Harvard who ended up having a intracerebral hemorrhage, or a bleed in the left side of her brain. And what she wrote about was her experience of having the left brain basically shut down. And she describes a feeling of not being able to verbalize, of course, because the left brain is controls your ability for speech and to verbalize. So she had difficulty with that, but she was more in tune with her feelings and her intuition. And she describes feeling connection with unity consciousness and the universe and the divine, connecting with like the animals and the plants and the trees. And she wrote about it in this book. And her message was basically that, oftentimes we become biased, or we become conditioned to only use one part or one side of our brain, which is the left brain. The Western society is focused on what they call in the spiritual world is the masculine energy, and the masculine energy versus the feminine energy. And the masculine energy in the left brain is all about doing. It's all about accomplishing. It's about competition. It's about how you're different from others. And you could say that your left brain is all about your ego. How do you identify yourself in the world? And what are these coping strategies that you've cultivated to get through challenges in life? So the left brain is about protection. It looks at and scans the world about, what puts me in danger, and, what do I have to do to protect myself? Whereas in the right brain, it gives you that access to that feeling of love and feeling of safety and feeling of connection. So some of the ancient traditions describe it as the feminine energy, more of the mother energy, the nurturing, the loving and the empathetic side. So what I've realized is that when there's an imbalance, then that's when we have problems. That when we are constantly in that protective mode, thinking about what we have to do and how do we compete and how do we, it's also, and the left brain is a survival. You're in the survival mode. You want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your finances and all of that. And when you're in that left brain and stuck in that, you're basically stuck in the filter of fear. And so, as you know, right now in our current society, we're in this situation where a lot of people are in fear. And that means that it sort of blocks off the access to that right brain, that connection with the divine and spirit. And what the work is, and the spiritual work, is developing and cultivating that connection with the divine. And you can only do that by being able to dampen down and decrease the activation of that left brain protective mechanism. And I almost see it as you can imagine a castle, and you have a bridge, and you have a moat around the bridge, a moat around the castle, and then the bridge is all, you put up the bridge when you feel that there's going to be some invaders or you need protection. And so you can sort of think of the left brain being like that it's that bridge being pulled up. So the left brain says, you need protection, you don't feel safe, you're going to put up your you can put up your defenses and make sure that no one's going to get you and so on. But what happens physiologically when you're in that state is you're in a state of stress, and you're in a state of what they call fight flight response. And when you're in a constant state of fight flight response, what happens is your hormonal system, your adrenal system, becomes overtaxed and it becomes strained, and then it burns out basically. And then you have what they call adrenal fatigue, which is your inability to counteract and activate your hormones and stress response when you deal with these challenges in life. So that's what happens with many of us, is that we become burnt out. We become unable to deal physically and emotionally and mentally with these stresses in our life. And then that results in emotional and physical suffering.
Mm. Yes. Wow. Thank you so much for that explanation. I think that can be really helpful for people trying to understand the difference between thinking with our mind and our logic and our left brain, and then dropping into that more intuitive feminine side. And so you were saying that you started following your intuition, you started opening up access to your right brain, and this led you to developing the Golden Hill Retreat Center?
Yes. So I realized that one of the factors that we need to address is, how do we help people reset their nervous system? Because as I described with prior to this, is that when our nervous system is in fight flight mode, we're not able to receive, and we're not able to access our connection with the divine and our spirit and our subconscious. And they say that our conscious awareness is only 5 to 10%, and it's our rational brain. It's what we know. It's what we've been given to us by our education and society, and the rest is into our right brain, our subconscious. And some would say that it's the access to the universal energy or the universal World Wide Web, that once you can connect to that, you have infinite ability to be able to access information, not only in our physical world, but also in more of that unseen esoteric world. And so the beauty of being able to dampen down that fight flight sympathetic response is that you're able to receive information that you normally wouldn't be able to if you're in that fight flight survival mode. So what a lot of the things that we do here at Golden Hill is to learn or teach people ways that they can tap into that spiritual side. And that's through things like meditation, the breath work, the shamanic ceremonies, making lifestyle changes, and also, the practical things like you have seen before is improving your nutrition and detoxifying and removing things that could be causing inflammation in your body. Because if you have inflammation in your body and your body's energy and focus is to get rid of that inflammation and toxicities, you really don't have the residual energy or efforts to be able to focus on connecting with your higher spiritual, emotional, mental states. So that is an emphasis that we have here. And one of the things that really has come to my awareness is that the importance of helping with decreasing the sympathetic response. And that is one of the things that I've found useful, is looking at the vibroacoustic modalities, the sound healing. Because when you're able to help with cultivating the right environment, your nervous system calms down, and your brain's ability to achieve certain levels of brainwave states comes on board. For example, when your fight flight is decreased, you're able to get out from the beta state, which is our sort of our daily sort of high stress level where you have to maintain a certain level of rational thinking. But when you're in that constant state, your stress response, like we talked about, is activated, and so you could become overstressed and burnt out. But when you're able to decrease that through vibroacoustic therapy, breath work, meditation, then you're able to do the things like yoga and some of these more higher level spiritual modalities. And you're able to follow through with those things and able to implement it in your life much easier. So that
Mhm.
is a big goal for us, for the people that come here, is to learn ways in order to become more able to access that right brain intuitive feeling side.
Nice. And the Golden Hill Retreat Center is located in Coldspring, Texas. But how long has it been around?
Yeah, so it's been around for about 2 years. So we took a property and we were guided to come to this particular property and to be in the country. And one of the most interesting things about how we came through here is in the real estate internet site, there was a picture of the property and it was a sign, a Trinity sign. And it's basically the three fish together. And, when my partner Jason and I were talking about symbols to use for the center, that was one of the symbols that we were considering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when I saw that on the listing, I basically cried because it it validated that we needed to be here at this particular place. And when we came to this place and we stepped out of the car, I immediately felt that peace and that calmness, and it felt just right in regards to
Mhm.
this is where we needed to be. So it
Wow.
was all in synchronicity that this property came into fruition. And we ended up, it took us about 2 years to renovate the buildings because there's 4 buildings in the property. And now we have a meditation building, we have a building for the kitchen, and we do teaching nutrition courses and other things there. And we also have a building for housing. So we can house about 25 people during a weekend, and four of them are rooms for private rooms, and the rest are shared rooms. So now we can usually host anywhere, 3 or 4 day retreats where we can dig deep into some of these modalities and for real true healing to take place.
Right. That's awesome. And I know that you and your partner facilitate some of these retreats. And then you also have facilitators who come with their own medicine and their own groups to kind of use the facilities and be with the energy of the land in order to pursue the healing that they are doing. And I'm curious to know what some of the challenges might have been in building this center in Cold Spring.
Yeah, so one of the first challenges that we had was adjusting to the country life because I would have never guessed that I would be moving here in the country. All my adult life, I've been in the city. I've been a city boy. And so coming out here in a town of 853 people was definitely a big adjustment. And so one of the things that was also challenging was being in a rural community that really didn't have many people that are exposed to things like the holistic healing and alternative healing. However, the universe definitely put us in the right place because soon after we moved here, within a month, we discovered that there was a group in this little town that met every week, and they met for like 10 to 12 years, and they are a group that did meditations and they did spiritual work. And as soon as we heard that, it was a validating our feeling that this is the right place for us. So we have now connected with this group, and they're become our big supporters of the center. Is this group that is supporting us and helping spread the word in the local community, but also being the active participants. But I still have challenges in getting the word out there because we have people that are thinking that we are a center that is only a certain tradition or base. And one of the most frequent things that we get, or I've heard, is that if you believe in Jesus or are a Christian, that this wouldn't be a place for you to go to because there's a lot of people that have stigma, or they're not aware of what we're actually doing, and things like shamanism. A lot of people don't really know what that's about, and they can affiliate it with things like voodoo or witchcraft or paganism, and a lot of what the historical views on these type of things were not such a positive thing. So that's been a challenge for us in trying to get the word out there that we are not, promoting a specific religion or a dogma or way of thinking or life, but what we're promoting here is really ways for you to connect with nature, connect with each other, connect with your soul, and connect with your higher power, whatever that is. And we're not saying that this is the higher power that you should believe. But all we're saying is, we want to help you in connecting with that higher power, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Islam, and connecting with Allah. We encourage that. We want you to be able to connect with whatever tradition and whatever beliefs that you feel that you resonate with.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The mission is kind of like you stated previously, to help people to get out of that fight or flight state that we so often find ourselves in, to drop in and connect more deeply to our emotional bodies, to our spiritual truth, whatever that looks like for us. It's going to be different from individual to individual, and to be able to move forward living a life that is more holistically fulfilling on every level.
Yes, that is the primary goal. But also the other goal is, I felt it was very much needed that we have a center of collaboration. So we have many different groups that are doing their particular modality or medicine for healing, but there's not many opportunities where we all can gather and work together and collaborate. So one of my missions is to be able to work with many different healers and be able to collaborate on something that would be more holistic, incorporating various modalities and traditions, and incorporating spirituality with science. Because I think that's really where we need to go, is integrate our spirituality with the physical sciences. And they're both needed. And it's important that it happens now, because there's many traditions like the Hopi Indians and even the Vedic traditions that tell of a time that what the Native Americans say is this is the time where the eagle and the condor fly together. And what that means is that spirituality, which is symbolized by the condor, spirituality, your intuition, the connection with nature, is integrated or flies together with the science and technology and more of the physical evidence, science evidence-based information. So that, along with the spiritual world, together combined, will be more of a holistic model, and that will allow for true healing and also empower each person to take responsibility to do the healing themselves and not have to rely on things like hospitals and the doctors and medical systems, and take ownership of doing their own healing by looking at their lifestyle and nutrition and healing their mental, emotional, spiritual wounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, finding their inner healer, right?
Yes, so that's actually our mission statement. Is our mission statement at Golden Hill is to activate and connect with your inner healer.
Yeah, that's beautiful because it puts the power back in the hands of the people, right? Instead of waiting for the doctor or anybody else to quote unquote fix us, it's looking within ourselves and taking action based on that own inner truth.
Yes. So that is a big part of healing. And what I found in a lot of the traditions and spiritual modalities was that when you're able to cultivate a person's feeling of being safe and protected, that that fight flight response and that left brain rigid thinking basically is deactivated or lessened, and you're able to access more of that spiritual, intuitive side.
Mhm.
So a lot of the things that we do is to try to promote that feeling of safety, connection, and love by doing community bonding, by doing these rituals that will help us connect with our soul and connect to each other in order for us to become more open and to create
Yes.
and be more expansive instead of being restricted and rigid thinking and being tunnel vision. And what I find a lot of times, when especially when you get into academics, and I have a lot of respect for academics and all of that, but when you're so restricted and this is how things should be, it really blocks you and prevents you from accessing, all of that information in that expansive, universal consciousness. That it's a lot harder to come up with new things and create new things. So by tapping into that uh, right side brain and that feeling of safety and creation, you're going to be able to create new and more expansive things that maybe these people have never even heard of. And you have all these famous inventors and creators that were able to do that they were able to get.
Mm.
And this is what I've heard about Einstein and Tesla and those famous creators, was that they were able to tap into that right brain and to get out of that left brain, box rigid thinking. And that's when they develop these so innovative formulas and this way of thinking. And that's what we need to do now, is to be able to get to that space where we're creating new things in order for the whole world to heal.
Yeah, and evolve, right, on a massive level. So that's amazing. The work that you're doing is so important, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to feature it on this podcast today. And I want to know, how can people stay connected with what's going on at the Golden Retreat Center?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. One is to look at our website, and our website is goldenhillretreat.com. And you can reach us by email at info@goldenhillretreat.com. We also have a Facebook page, and it's called Golden Hill Retreat Center. So we usually try to post newsletters and our events through those social media outputs.
Okay, perfect. So again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your medicine with us, sharing your story. It's so colorful and unique and full of rich lessons, as well as sharing with us the work that you do at the retreat center. And hopefully somebody listening to this in the area might be inspired to check out some of the events that y'all have going on. So before we depart today, I want to know, does this interview feel complete to you? Or is there any additional insights or information that you feel called to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the biggest message for me is, my hope and goal is to plant the seeds and open up people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was put in this position to be a bridge to be able to explore how these ancient traditions can be integrated into our modern healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hope is that just by doing things like this and interviews and podcasts like yours, that we become those people or the initiators that plant the seed in order for these changes to occur. And hopefully, as more information spreads, this will help healing those people. And because they're healed, they can spread the healing and love to others. And so that's what I'm hoping that we all aspire to, is that we become a light and we can spread that light to other people in order for true change to occur in our world, in our planet.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that piece of heart-centered wisdom. That's a wonderful note to end on. So, Dr. Nelson Valena, thank you again so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to collaborating with anything in the future with you.
Awesome. And thank you so much to our amazing listeners and viewers. This has been another episode of the Soulful Self podcast.